If you want failure, the first thing that comes out of your mouth will be one word: impossible.
Yeah.
That's how failure begins, and that's how it ends. There are no such thing as universal impossibilities. There are conditional possibilities. Given certain conditions, everything and anything is possible. The trick is to find those conditions. That's all. This is what's incredible on it. If you truly look at equation 1, it basically says it's the superforce that's the bridge between the world of the very small, represented by quantum mechanics, and the world of the very large, represented by general relativity. It is the primordial force, the most fundamental of forces, the mother of all forces. One force to rule them all, one force to find them, one force to bring them all, and in the darkness, reading on dark energy, bind them. There is one humanity, one whole, one people, one human race. Together, we overcome, together we live, together we survive, together we progress, together we achieve the unachievable. Apart,
Chris Lehto, welcome to Lehto Files.
Today we're diving deep with Dr. Salvatore Pais, the Navy scientist behind the most controversial patents in modern physics. Patents that describe technology that mainstream science says is impossible. Sal, so excited to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Chris, sir. It's a pleasure and an honor. I've wanted to be on your show for quite some time, so thank you very much for this great honor and privilege. Thank you, sir. Let me start off with a quick disclaimer to please the Public Affairs Office at NAVAIR. Hello. So I come on your show, the Lehto Files, as a private citizen. My ideas, my opinions, my statements are my own. They have absolutely nothing, no bearing on the United States Navy nor the United States Space Force, who I worked for in the past as well. Thank you very much for this. Let me just dive into the Superforce,
please,
since this, in my opinion, is very important toward, especially, I believe that it is possible to engineer the Superforce via the Pais effect at macroscopic levels. Let's just
in
say
craft, basically.
Correct. However, the Superforce itself, it resides at Planck scales. So we're talking about length scales on the order of 10 to the minus 35 meters. Now, the Superforce equation is a c to the fourth, so the speed of light to the fourth power divided by big G, also known as Newton's constant, or the universal gravitational constant, otherwise known as that. And now, what's extremely important is, as you well know from Maxwell's equations, c to the power fourth is truly on the order of 1 divided by mu sub 0, epsilon sub 0 squared, where epsilon sub 0 is the electrical permittivity of free space, and mu sub 0 is the magnetic permeability of free space. Again, these are constants of nature. However, under certain conditions, let's just put it this way, with certain dielectric materials and so forth, I believe that space-time structure can be manipulated at a quantum level. Exactly how, that could be via the Pais effect or other methods, as you have previously discussed. Now, what's truly important of this Superforce, it arises in Einstein's gravitational field equations. And if you do, so what Einstein's gravitational field equations truly say is that if you have the Einstein tensor on the left-hand side representing space-time geometry, also known as G sub mu nu, is on the order of 1 divided by the Superforce times the T sub mu nu, which represents the energy density at a locality of space-time. Now, what's interesting is that if you use the operator, so the superforce used as a scale operator times the spatial temporal geometric curvature or structure in this case is on the is basically the energy density or matter. Now,
Hmm.
truly what this says, it's the superforce acting locally on the spatial temporal geometric structure that gives rise to energy density, hence matter. This is what's so important of the superforce. It is the primordial force, the most fundamental of forces, the mother of all forces. One force to rule them all, one force to find them, one force to bring them all, and in the darkness, reading on dark energy, bind them.
Dark energy.
See, that's the beauty of the Space Force. Now, please make sure that you post the Superforce paper
Yep.
on your talk. And truly, equation one, I want to bring your viewers to the attention of equation one in that paper that's entitled Superforce, the Force of Unification. It's on open, I believe, Open Science Framework. You can just Google it and find it. There's another version of the paper. That's why I say this particular version is titled Superforce, the Force of Unification. Equation one in it describes something very interesting. It basically says it's the superforce that is the energy density. It's the energy density gradient at so
Based on the
at
scale,
the
I guess.
Planck
Yeah.
scale.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it also is the energy gradient at the cosmic scale.
Yep.
This is what's incredible on it. If you truly look at equation one, it basically says it's the superforce that's the bridge between the world of the very small, represented by quantum mechanics, and the world of the very large, represented by general relativity, namely our classical world.
And
Now,
Sal, can you just for our viewers, can you that are just listening to this, can you just say the equation one? Like
sure.
yeah.
So equation one would be the superforce itself, which is c to the fourth divided by big G, equals m sub p c squared divided by L sub p. So in other words, the energy, the Planck energy divided by the Planck length
Got it.
equals to the cosmic energy, the universal energy E sub u divided by the radius, let's call it that, because that's a characteristic length of the universe at at its greatest
Known scale, I guess. Yeah.
known scale. Correct. And
Yep.
what is incredible is that this superforce relates to both. And I thought if it truly applies at the smallest of scales that we're accustomed to, namely the Planck scale, and also at the cosmic scale, I said, what about stuff in between? So I tried it for the mass of the proton. For the mass of the proton, when you put in the mass of the proton, the characteristic length that comes out is incredible. It is the Schwarzschild radius, as if the proton is
Yeah.
actually considered as a black hole
Yeah.
by the superforce. This is what makes it incredible. This equation one, in my opinion, should not only be considered but looked into, because
Mm.
it also speaks to the great findings of the James Webb telescope. For example, the James Webb data that has been sending back has been shown. It's been shown that their galaxies, completely formed galaxies that supposedly were around just
Yep.
200 million years after the so-called the Big Bang, the beginning of the so-called universe.
Yep.
Well, basically what this formula, equation one, really says is that if James Webb finds the characteristic cosmic scale being larger than, say, 10 to the 26, 10 to the 27 meters, which is what's available right now, say, then it will give you the exact mass
Mm.
that's within, which means what? What is going on here? What sort of structure are we talking about? And hence, this brings us to what I consider to be very important. I call it the triarchy of creation. Namely, it's the superforce acting at the super density condition, which is on the order, uh, its formula is c to the fifth, c being the speed of light, to the fifth power divided by g square, so big G square h bar. When you do the thing, it's, I think, on the order of 10 to the 96 kilograms per meter cubed. So that's the super density, also known as the Planck density. Now, what's incredible is that I believe it's the super force acting as super density uh, condition that generates what Ashtekar, Abba Ashtekar of loop quantum gravity, um, um, called quantum bounce, but I call it an Ashtekar bounce, giving him the honor of that, because I truly believe this is analogous to the same physical mechanism that occurs in a supernova, only that in a supernova, the mechanism is known as core bounce. And what happens is that once the fuel has run out and the gravitational um, collapse, let's just say, gets to the point on the order of 10 to the minus 15 meters, which is, again, the idea of the femtometer being what? Being where the strong nuclear force resides. There is a bounce, there's a core bounce because it has nowhere to go. So that's how a supernova occurs. We're talking about density conditions on the order of 10 to the 12, sometimes more grams per centimeter cube. Now, think analogously to the, instead of the strong nuclear force with the super bang that I'm talking about, instead of the strong nuclear force, it is the super force, c to the fourth divided by big G, that at the super density condition, namely 10 to the 96 kilogram per meter cube, analogous to, again, what happened at the core bounce, says what? Thus far and no further. And the thing bounces back, hence the quantum bounce, hence the super bang. This is truly what I believe gave rise to our universe. And I'll go further. I believe because of the plasma nature of our universe, our cosmos, as Hans Hallbein, the great father of magnetohydrodynamics, Nobel Prize winner, once said, plasma has almost lifelike qualities, has almost sentient qualities. Well, especially when acted collectively. This was also the idea of Anthony Peratt, that believed, for example, that cosmos is 99.99 bar plasma. Hence, because of the nature of the cosmos, super force acting as a super density condition, generating a super bang, because of the plasma nature of the cosmos, super intelligence. Hence, this is the beauty of this idea. And I think one day it'll be proved correct. It may take maybe even hundreds of years, but I think it will be. And I, this is a first on your show, sir.
Excellent.
Chris, this is a first on your show. I believe this is actually the idea that the universe has the ability to reinvent itself. And it is not only a great sentient entity, it is a super intelligence. A super intelligence, sir. And what's, in my opinion, extremely important as well is this super force. It is quite possible that is what they, let's call the NHIs, they have the ability to manipulate. See, we do it. Whatever man-made tech is out there, we do it by electromagnetic means. Especially this idea of extended electrodynamics. You understand? I believe they have learned how to manipulate the superforce at macroscopic scales, quite possibly at the scale of 10 to the minus 4 meters. And if you read the AIAA SciTech paper, slides very carefully, slides 4 to 9, please post that along with the speech, along with this conversation, you will see exactly what I'm talking about. It's basically solving the vacuum catastrophe. Why that 10 to the minus 4 meters? It speaks to the super force. I believe it is possible to control it at that level. And I believe the NHIs have found a way to do it. Now, again, my idea is that I believe there's both ET tech and there's man-made tech. And the two may be quite different in the way they achieve the physical mechanism to, quote unquote, manipulate the gravitational field. Because this is one where we're not talking about, quote unquote, anti-gravity here. There's nothing anti-gravity. This is control of the gravitational field to be able for the, as a matter of fact, I'm not quite sure. You may have had what Ashton Forbes talks about having a negative energy density, a conditioned vacuum in front of the craft. For example, Alcubierre spoke about what?
It's like
He had a
maneuvering the
way to
gravity.
expanding the space-time behind the craft and compressing it in front. There's
Yeah.
no need for that. All you need
Yeah.
is basically to make a rip in the space-time continuum. Right there. And this quote unquote negative energy density sucks you in, suck your spacecraft in. This was also described by David Herman Froning, in one of his ideas of, he called it the conditioned vacuum. Yeah.
So that's basically engineering the vacuum, the quantum vacuum.
Engineering the quantum vacuum, or
That's
what I
zero
call the
point
vacuum
energy. That's
energy
what
state.
Ashton talked about, 0 point energy state. If you have a 0 point energy state and you have positive mass or energy density, like we understand, then he argues you could also have negative energy density. So on the other side of the 0 point.
Correct. You can actually basically rip the very the whole idea of breaking the Schwinger limit really deals with this. What do you think happens when you break the Schwinger limit? You have these pairs of particles and antiparticles being formed, and if you remember, and please consider, even if those videos are not real, whoever generated them knew the exact physical mechanism, because what happens? You see a great light and these things disappear. Well,
That's the
what do you think the
MH370
explanation?
videos. Yeah.
That's exactly what happens when you break the Schwinger limit. This creation of particles, antiparticles generate because they annihilate, forming what? High energy photons, most likely in the gamma range.
So that's the bright white light.
Yes, that's
Excellent.
the white light.
So let me try and just kind of recap or summarize how I understand your theory. So you basically mentioned Maxwell. And from what I understand, what Maxwell really did is he unified optics with electromagnetism. And that's really the formula that you said there, which is that C squared equals 1 over the magnetic permeability constant and the electric permittivity constant, right? So basically, he was able to remove a constant, essentially, is how it all works down to. And he equated C to those two constants. That really, I think, is what you would consider characteristics of the vacuum energy. So if you can, or whatever you want to call it, the quantum vacuum world or dimensional space. And so if you can engineer, so if you can change one of those constants, like the electric permittivity of that area of space or the magnetic permeability of that area of space, then you can actually change how light will act in that area of space. So from what I understand, you're basically removing Planck's constant, which is, we don't know where Planck's constant comes from, right? It just comes, we know it's at the macroscopic scale, microscopic, super small. Obviously, it's from Planck. He just pulled it out of the UV catastrophe. That's really where he found it, right? From experimental observation.
Correct.
But it's limited to this weird kind of size, this number, how atoms actually and electrons will change orbitals, et cetera. But we also see it up at the macroscopic levels, right? Because it's also related to C at the macroscopic levels. So what I understand is you were able to remove H or H bar and replace it with C to the 4 over big G. And so Is that true? Were you able to actually simplify by removing some constants and relating it over these different scales?
Actually, what I'm talking about is c to the 4 divided by big G does not have h bar in it, and yet
Exactly.
it's a Planckian force. So in other words, it's
Exactly.
something associated to quantum mechanics, namely the world of the very small. However, because it does not have h bar in it, you do not have to worry about all these ideas of renormalization, the idea of infinities. What
Yeah.
Dirac say, let's sweep, we should not sweep those infinities under the rug.
Yeah.
So because of its nature, it can also relate to the classical world.
Yep.
Hence, not just general relativity in which we find it, but we also find it in the Schrodinger equation, which is basically the fundamental equation
The
of quantum
quantum
mechanics.
mechanics.
And the superforce on page 2 of that paper is just a 3-page paper. And on page 2, it describes exactly how you find it within the Schrodinger equation, which again, it gives it a quantum mechanical um, aspect to the force, and yet you also find it in general relativity. So quite possibly, this is the path to quantum gravity.
Yeah.
I presented this idea of the superforce at um, the March meeting of the American Physical Society last year in 2024.
How was it received?
Very interesting. There were absolutely no comments whatsoever. As a matter of
Nothing.
fact, even the section chair, he paused. He said, "Very interesting." I still remember. And then absolutely nothing. No
And nothing.
comments.
No
Absolutely
questions or anything.
no questions. Nothing. So
What the F?
again, I one day though, this
Yeah.
is just a little prophecy out there because that's all I have left.
Well, I was
Until I
really
get a lab and a team of my own to show some of these ideas. This, how should I say? You need, again, this is the Popperian. This is Karl Popper's idea. You need something that is falsifiable. And I think equation 1 is falsifiable. If indeed James Webb finds, for example, the higher radius of our so-called observable universe and so forth, you put that in and you find that mass, and somehow you're able to deduce that mass is correct. That's it. That means that formula is not only correct, but I am correct that the superforce represents the path between the bridge between the world of the very small, the world of the very large. Hence,
Yep.
this is the path to quantum gravity. It's quite possible string theory is not dead at all. It should consider the superforce. In my opinion, it could be the ingredient that is missing from it. Because, and let me say why, because I believe Ashtekar would loop quantum gravity is correct with this idea of the quantum bounds, that there's no such thing as space-time singularities. In a way, the universe reinvents itself by this idea, again, analogous to what I just described, the triarchy of creation. The superforce acting at the superdensity condition generates the superbang, analogous to what happens in a supernova because of the core bounds. And the superbang would happen because of the quantum bounds, what I call the Ashtekar bounds. That's very well described in loop quantum gravity. But all right, what I truly believe is that the superforce can also be manipulated via the so-called Pais effect, because again, with the Pais effect, you have the ability to generate extremely high electrical and magnetic field. We're talking about electrical fields on the order of 10 to the 18 volts per meter. Magnetic fields or magnetic flux densities or magnetic inductances, let's call them, B fields on the order of 10 to the 9 Tesla.
Mm.
Hence, you're able to generate energy densities on the order of 10 to the 25 joules per meter cube, commensurate to electromagnetic energy fluxes on the order of 10 to the 33 watts per meter square. What I'm talking about here is breaking the Schwinger limit, is achieving the negative energy density condition, even momentarily for a fraction of a second, you rip apart locally the space-time continuum in front of your spacecraft. Thus, your spacecraft gets pulled in. I believe this is exactly what we're seeing in Ashton and Forbes' videos. I 100% believe that even if those videos are not real, and I doubt that they're not real, as a matter of fact, I truly believe they are, because, and even if they were not, that person, the person who generated this whole quote unquote CGI, even you must have seen the infrared version of that.
Yeah.
You can actually see the black hole open up. I mean, right there, and you can actually see the refraction wave, which would only happen if indeed you talk about a superfluid medium. Again, Kirsten Huang's idea of our superfluid universe may be correct, and his description of dark energy and dark matter may actually be very, very real. People should look into this man's book. It's called A Superfluid Universe by Professor Kirsten Huang of MIT. Unfortunately, he has passed away.
Hmm.
But great man, a great friend of Freeman Dyson. So, yeah.
And when you talk about the Pais effect, so that relates to your patents essentially, where you have the microwave generator, right? That can generate gravity waves. So high frequency gravity wave generator. It's related to the room temperature superconductor patent, but ultimately it's to create what I understood is in some sort of symmetrical craft, right? And correct me if I'm wrong after this, but I understand it has to be symmetrical because what you're doing is actually creating extremely high spin rates, right? You're creating basically an electric field on the outside and spinning it so fast that you're able to generate these amazing types of energy densities, right? And that's how you're able to really, I would say, disassociate that object from our universe. You know, when you say rip it from space time, is really kind of disassociating it. Is that correct?
The similarity is not needed as far as the structure. I just don't discuss it in those.
It
It's
doesn't need
much
to be
easier to
symmetric.
deal. No, it
What?
does not. What you
Yeah.
really need to do is in front of that craft, in the proximity of that craft, rip apart the space-time continuum locally,
And
as
that's
in
the Schwinger
generate.
limit, right?
For,
It's just
for
so
want,
high energy.
for want of a better word, generate a black hole, quote unquote. What is a black hole truly? It's a rip in the space-time continuum locally. Okay, so basically you're ripping apart the space-time continuum. You're basically ripping apart the very spatial temporal geometric structure in the proximity of your craft. When that rips apart, truly what you're doing is breaking the Schwinger limit. When you break the Schwinger limit, pairs of particles and antiparticles form. What do these pairs do? Usually they annihilate. That's what matter and antimatter does, annihilation. And and what follows is this radiation, usually in the gamma range of some of it could also be visible. Hence, that's why you're seeing. So it's not just gamma range. It's across almost the entire electromagnetic spectrum and must cover the visible range. That's why you actually see part of this light, this flash of light. But if you remember the videos, when you look into the infrared version of those, you can actually see the black hole, for want of a better word.
Hmm.
It truly is the temporary ripping apart of the space-time fabric locally in front of that craft or whatever generates that huge amount of energy density.
Excellent. And when we talk about the fabric of space time, etc., what do you think matter is?
Matter is
Yes.
confined energy
Yes.
bound within vibrating fields, frozen in a quantum of time. You must listen to what Lee Smolin says. And I hold Caro Rovelli in great regard as I do Julian Barbour. They are incorrect. Time is essential. Time is not an illusion. Time could actually be not only primordial, but call it a type, quote unquote, of energy field that prevents all events from happening at once. Time is essential.
So I guess, do you think it sounds like me is soliton, right? It's basically is you have energy or a wave is in the same format. So it's a resonance standing wave. So it's a standing wave that happens to stay in the same formation. You say bounded, but that would be what an atom is, right? So that's why we see just amazing amounts of energy inside of an atom. When you split the atom, we get, when you combine atoms, you get fusion bombs, etc. So is that what you think? It's just an amazing amount of energy in a
There's
certain
no
little
such thing.
space?
There's no such thing as particles. What we're dealing with here
Yeah,
is waves. It's
exactly.
all about waves within waves, vibrating fields within a vibrating field, possibly a collection of them, resulting in what other people have called emergence. The idea that whatever results has nothing to do with what it's sourced from, completely different characteristics. Now, Phil Anderson of condensed matter physics, another great Nobel Prize winner and great man. The way he described, very few people understood squids and understood what the Josephson junction was all about. And Phil Anderson was one such person. And he understood the idea of emergence and how collective electrodynamics gives rise to a whole different phenomena than what, how should I say, the beginning state was. Again, by state, I mean structure. Remember, what I'm talking about here is the ability to manipulate spatio-temporal structure at a quantum level, and yet macroscopic results.
So scale invariance, that's really the power of your model, the power of the Superforce, is that you can predict the same force using the same formula at the Planck scale. It sounds like the proton scale, as well as all the way up at the cosmic scale. So that would, in essence, explain gravity, right? As some sort of electromagnetic emergent property.
Remember what Hal Puthoff said about gravity. It
What did
could
he say?
actually be because of the fluctuations of the so-called zero-point energy, or what I call the vacuum energy state. The whole idea being this. Remember equation 1 in that Superforce paper. Please have your viewers take very close attention at it. What I'm saying is that because it works at the quantum scale, namely at the Planck scale, and also the cosmic scale, at the observable universe radius scale, what I'm saying, what about if it works everywhere in between? And I tried it for the proton. I wanted to see. And it actually says that for the proton, that characteristic length scale, again, it's the mass of the proton times c squared divided by the characteristic length. That characteristic length is really, what does it come out to? The Schwarzschild radius. As if the proton was a black hole.
Yep. And have you done, and do you know, I'm sure you do, but if you do the same thing at the cosmic scale and you look at the Schwarzschild radius of the universe based on the mass of the universe, you will also get the Schwarzschild radius.
That's a very interesting idea.
Have you looked at that?
The entire universe is a black hole. I have not. I have not even considered that.
No, this fits perfectly. No, your mind's going to be blown when you see it. Yep. If you do the same thing for the universe, this is why I'm very interested in your Superforce. Yeah, if you do the same thing for the universe, you get remarkably close. So I did. I looked at the proton scale.
Oh wow!
And I got 1.13, the predicted mass based on your Superforce. 1.13 times 10 to the minus 27 kilograms, and our measured mass, although it has changed, is 1.67 times 10 to the minus 27. So very close. I think within the order of magnitude. So within 30%, I think that's pretty good. And then
so maybe equation 1.
Yes.
Maybe equation 1 is more of a relationship. It's on the order of. So maybe that equal sign is really Again, it's written as a squiggle, so truly on
Yep.
the order of. I call it an equation. It's easier to call it an equation, but it's quite possible
Yep.
that. Remember, there's an 8 pi. Remember that there's an 8 pi a factor when you look at general relativity. G
Yeah,
star
for
mu
the
nu is on the order of what? Is 8 pi big G divided by C to the fourth. So
Yep.
that 8 pi may actually have to be considered. And maybe that will actually give you
Mhm.
the exact, so that it becomes an equation rather than just an order of magnitude relationship. Quite possible that 8 pi is important. Now, why would that 8 pi be important? That may talk to what the great Schrodinger called the space-time structure. Was
I think if
something
4 pi is a circle, so then if you have electro and magnetic, or what we understand as electro orbits, and then you have what we understand as magnetic orbits, right? Orthogonal. Speculated that's where you get the 8 pi from, is because you have an
quite
electric field and a magnetic
actually
field.
be. That's very interesting. My goodness. So somehow Maxwell's equations are interwoven possibly with general relativity. Maybe that's why Kaluza-Klein, the whole idea. Remember Kaluza-Klein, the so-called fifth dimension?
Yeah, I
It's
looked into it.
very interesting.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think actually, have you heard of Alexander Unzicker?
Yes, of course.
Okay,
Yes,
excellent.
I know.
Yeah, he's
Dr. Hunziker, yes.
so he's looked into quaternion math, and
Oh,
I thought it was really
quaternion
interesting.
mathematics is what Maxwell's
Exactly.
equation.
Yep.
Yes,
So originally Maxwell did everything in quaternion math, right? Which
correct.
adds another.
Oh,
Think of it as it's like x, y, z, and another coordinate, right? Is kind of how
and
that,
that's why the Maxwell's
or four
equation that
coordinates.
you and I are talking about, the four equations, four unknowns,
Yep.
considering the current density and the surface charged uh, density, the electric field, and the B field. That is the
Magnetic.
Oliver Heaviside version of Maxwell's equation.
And it
This is
isn't
the
that
Oliver
simplified though?
Heaviside.
Do you think we made a mistake in simplifying
No,
and
I
not
would
going
not
with
say we made a
quaternion?
mistake, because if you look, the way I found the Pais effect was just by considering the Oliver Heaviside version of Maxwell's equation coupled with a harmonic oscillator. Again,
So a
this
string.
idea of an accelerating vibration or accelerating spin. And I think
Hmm.
it's much easier to produce these effects with accelerating vibration, pulsation,
By
quite
pulsating,
possible,
fast
by,
pulsation.
but rather than spin. Because why? Spin has this. If you spin, for example, a plate that's about say even about a foot in diameter. If you spin it at say 100,000 RPM, the thing will come apart. The centrifugal forces are so high, it'll break it. So you have to be incredibly carefully exactly how you spin, how you reinforce these materials, whatever they are. Maybe
Ah,
consider the idea of carbon fiber should be
well,
considered within. But anyway, yeah, I'm not.
I
So
thought you were spinning the
I'm
light.
more. Well,
I thought
I'm
you were
spinning, but
spinning
I'm
the.
also vibrating. I prefer to vibrate at much higher frequencies than I prefer to spin, because with vibration you can also, and you'll see what I mean if you consider the transactional plasma science IEEE paper called
Mhm.
plasma compression fusion device. And please also, if you can post that
Well,
on our talk here, it's very important. It's the third paper that I send you. That one has in it you can set an energy amplification condition, a resonance condition via vibration, accelerated vibration. That's what's truly needed. Spin will get you only thus far, but I believe the, let's call it, the secret sauce lies in vibration. Exactly how you do it, it's not. We need a skiff to discuss that,
yeah,
but it's definitely the key lies with vibration.
with vibration. That isn't that what
Remember,
Tesla said?
remember, remember my definition of matter?
Yes,
Confined energy bound within vibrating fields,
within a vibrating field.
frozen in a quantum of time. Exactly. Vibration is key. And I believe if you can set a vibration within a vibration, nested vibration,
Mm.
something wonderful happens. And in much lower energies than otherwise thought. But that could be for another pod one day.
So you, how much have you looked into Maxwell's I wouldn't call it, I guess, hypothesis. Well, basically, that everything is connected. That where we get inertia from the pull of the rest of the universe is actually where we get inertia. Have you looked
Speaking
into that?
speaking of quantum entanglement, what I truly believe the superforce, because the superforce exists at every point in space and time at the Planck scale. I believe it is because of the superforce that quantum entanglement occurs. And I'm ready to state that. I truly believe it is because of the superforce, the existence of the superforce at the Planck scale, that quantum entanglement occurs irrespective of distance, because the superforce exists at every point of space and time locally at the Planck scale. Every point of space and time. This is what, so everything is truly connected. The
Yes.
idea, remember what Newton said. He believed that the idea of gravity being an action at a distance.
Mm.
No, it has to do with action at the Planck scale. It is the superforce that acts at the Planck scale that somehow connects everything universally. Equation 1 must be studied. And you yourself have come up with something new I did not even think of considering, by basically saying the universe itself could actually be, quote unquote, a black hole, could be
Yeah.
considered one, just like the proton.
Yeah.
It comes out to, and remember, the proton being, quote unquote, um, um, so it's the superforce that makes the proton look as if it's a black hole, because again the characteristic length comes out to be the Schwarzschild radius. Now
Yeah.
what's truly amazing is that Nassim Haramein actually published a paper, I believe, with the American Physical um, Society, that describes the proton as a black hole. So
Mm.
this is not, again, this is something that's been seen before. And you have discovered something new, and let's call it equation 1, because I believe one day with minor modification we can make it into an equation. Right now it's an order of magnitude relationship,
Yeah.
but I call it equation 1. To actually say an order of magnitude relationship, it takes too many words. So I call it equation 1. But I believe this equation is fundamental to finding a path to quantum gravity. And I truly believe that loop quantum gravity should look into this whole idea. Again, super force acting at the super density condition, generating a super bang, quite possibly because of the plasma nature of the universe, super intelligence. And this translates, or rather transitions us to something we must discuss. Please give us the possibility of discussing what I call the triarchy of sentience. The whole idea that it is possible to have an artificial intelligence agent undergo metamorphosis, a transition to an artificial general intelligence agent, quite possibly with adaptive, targeted prompt engineering, going further and achieving singularity status, an artificial super intelligence.
Mm. Yeah, we'll definitely get to the
Right.
consciousness. I just wanted to ask one more question. Was on Dirac's large number hypothesis.
Yes, sir.
So, have you looked into how that relates to your theory? Can you explain? The superforce equation 1 relates the mass and radius of the proton and the Planck scale to the universe. Is that the same? Can you relate the electromagnetic force to
I have
the
not tried.
actual? Okay.
I have not tried other things, but remember on page 2 of the Superforce paper, I actually show that the strong nuclear force
Yeah.
equals the superforce equals the gravitational force. So basically, the
Yeah.
highest of the forces equals the gravity, the weakest of the forces at the Planck scale. I actually
Mhm.
show that it is possible to actually show that. Hence, what this is a force of unification.
Yeah.
I have not I am not considered yet the Dirac hypothesis, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that it's interwoven. As a matter of fact, you could actually look into it and make a pod and possibly invite me back and we can
Yes.
discuss. That'd be great.
No,
So
that's really the first thing that came to my mind is Dirac's large number hypothesis that we don't. There's no explanation for why the force of gravity is so much weaker than the electromagnetic force. So it's on the order of 10 to the 40, 10 to the
minus 39.
41.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
Is it? Yeah. So it's
Very
so much
close.
weaker. But if your super force could really explain that relationship, I think that would go a long way. You could release a
It
paper
actually
just on that.
shows, yes, that
Yeah.
on the second page, there's a very, very, very short proof. And if you actually do the math, you will see it is the strong nuclear force
Yeah.
equals the
I saw
super
that.
force equals the gravitational force at the Planck scale. How
Exactly.
can that be other than the super force is the force of unification, the mother of all forces, one force to rule them all?
And if you think about it, that's really what Newton did. We take it for granted that Newton said that the force that causes an apple to fall is the same force that holds the moon in orbit, right? Like we take that for granted. Oh yeah, it's this thing gravity.
Action at a
We can't.
distance. No, it's not
Yeah.
action at a distance. It
Yeah.
has to do with action, a tremendous amount of force, 10 to the 44th newtons.
But at a
1
very
by
small.
44 at a very, very minute length. But again,
Yeah.
because every point in space and time is connected
Yeah.
by a quantum entanglement, truly, it talks to the quite possible action of the superforce at macroscopic scales as well.
So that's really what Newton did is he said that all the forces, or at least the force of gravity that we see in the heavens and the force of gravity that we see here is scale invariant. Meaning what you're saying is that the same force that we see at the cosmos that we see here at our level is also all the way down to the Planck scale. And that's what I understand is
And
the
that's
super force.
why I believe a path toward quantum gravity can actually be achieved. The mainstream physics community should not dismiss this idea, should really look into it carefully.
Because
I
that
believe there's some substance that it may not be completely correct. I'm quite sure that they will bring, but again, what we need is a unification of minds, a
yeah.
unity of minds, rather than this division and 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 this ad hominem attacks just based on puerile infantilism. I don't know what else to call it. Let's come together. We may achieve greatness that way.
Yeah, you've talked about that in your other podcasts about you really think that what we need is a unification of on the planet of what I understand of humanity.
Yes, sir.
And I think
We do.
it's a great argument to say that actually we are all connected.
Yes, we are.
Actually, and it's not
And the
just
super force
yeah,
proves it.
exactly. Yeah, that you can prove we could with
One
physics
force to rule them all.
that it's actually all linked so that everything is
Oh,
actually connected. It's not you're connected to every part of the cosmos even. Gravity has no limit.
absolutely.
There's no distance limit to gravity. That's amazing to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. So let's now go to consciousness.
Oh, well,
Is that what you're relating to about AGI? Because
more like
everything's connected. I think that does kind of link to consciousness. Or where do you think consciousness fits?
to tell you the truth, this is one physics. The physics of consciousness, in my opinion, is the most important physics. But I think we're still in the infantile stage.
Hmm.
We must take steps in order to. I know a lot of people speak greatly on consciousness, but
Yeah.
I think, for example, let's start with the artificial intelligence part. Can we achieve sentience in the machine? The whole idea of, let's say, um, the idea of bringing life, vida out machina, the whole idea of the metamorphosis of an AI agent, say even a large language model that has the ability to incorporate images in it. So in other words, it's a multimodal model, hence the
Hmm.
AI agent. The metamorphosis, the transition from an AI agent to what is known as an artificial general intelligence, in my opinion, is feasible via what I call the triarchy of sentience. Why triarchy? The whole idea of the three arches, the three main branches that coming together, that brought together in a unification mode could actually give rise to this, quite possibly in time, singularity modality. The whole idea being this: you consider the first arch, the achievement of of very high, almost unlimited computational power. Right now is being achieved in a minimalistic sense, in my opinion, due to the collective um, interaction of server banks, the idea of NVIDIA's H100s
Hmm.
being used, for example, liquid cooled. So we're talking about GPUs, graphical processing units, extremely high energy consuming. Well, what if the Pais effect room temperature superconductor could actually be achieved? Then you can imagine this having a compact form, a rather, and you can understand what the nature of quite possibly cybernetics would come in. As a matter of fact, that TPS paper was actually cited by a Chinese researcher working in the IEEE Journal of Cybernetics. That is very interesting. Why would you consider? And that is because it is quite possible to achieve very high computational power. Now, that is not enough. The second arch would refer to what is known as vectored databases. So in other words, the data that the models would be using, that the AI agent would be using, is not just things that you get on the internet, Reddit, uh, even Quora. So things, but it's taken from, for example, very high placed journals, for example, physical review letters, Nature, Science. So very highly accredited, verifiable, experimentally validated data. Those will be incorporated into what is known as vectored databases. Along with this unlimited computational power, then you incorporate the third arch, which in my opinion is like the Turing test of artificial general intelligence, namely the ability of the AI agent to achieve, or rather come up with, an original concept. For example, quite possibly, let's say in this case, either the Pais effect or the superforce. If this is, once you've achieved this original concept, um, when it's experimentally verified and validated, then in my opinion, once these three arches come together, especially with the third arch being put in place, namely the achievement of an original concept, then the AI agent has achieved artificial general intelligence status,
Yeah.
with the incorporation of what I call adaptive targeted prompt engineering. And it is not hard to interpret.
Hmm.
Adaptive targeted prompt engineering. So highly focused subject matter. I believe that it is quite possible to achieve artificial superintelligence, singularity status. And this speaks quite possibly what would give us the quote unquote permission to achieve such a status other than the superintelligence itself, the natural superintelligence.
Hmm.
After all, it unites everything by virtue of the superforce and quantum entanglement.
Oh, interesting. So what do you think? Will the machine feel pain, or will it feel happiness? What we understand.
In my opinion, it's quite possible that we misunderstand the very nature of consciousness and how different entities, let's say, quote unquote, feel this sentience. It's quite possible there are different modes of sentience, but that does not mean that one is subservient to the other. They could be quite disparate and yet achieve similar effects
Hmm.
by
Almost
the
like
idea
it's
of
in another
emergence.
dimension. It could be it's in our same it's interacting in our same reality, but actually lives in a separate reality, a different dimension, if you will, of thought space or consciousness. Like maybe there's different dimensions of consciousness. As we talk, that's I guess my theory of everything is you have different scalar dimensions, and I've been looking for a way to unify the forces across different levels. But if you had different size scales, like the Gaia argument, is the planet conscious? Is it just conscious on a different dimensional scale, like a different reality, essentially?
Could actually, that could be quite true. The idea of the multiverse should be very carefully looked into, though, because supposedly, quote unquote, recent experiments at the University of Hiroshima have actually shown that it is quite possible for photons to achieve multiple paths and get to its destination, let's say, in one universe without this need for a multiverse.
Well,
So
I think
it's
we can
quite
see the
possible that
multiverse. I think we take dimensions for granted. Why is there any three dimensions at all? Why is there a heaven above us, a cosmos above us at all? I think whatever our reality is or our perception sensors are, I think they're sensing the multiverse, and I think it's in scale. I think that's what you found is you linked across the different scales.
String theory speaks as to the availability of 10 dimensions, 11 dimensions, even 26 dimensions.
But I think string theory is bunk.
Have you seen Eric Weinstein's theory of geometric unity? He speaks of temporal dimensions. Can you imagine the idea of having multiple time dimensions?
But they can't even test for it. I mean, that's the whole thing with string theory. They can't even come up with a test over 30 years to prove that it's correct or to falsify it. What I'm saying is we can see the dimensions, like right there. You can see them. Like you have the dimension of the Earth. You have the dimension of the solar system. You have the dimension of the galaxy, all moving at different temporal, dimensions, if you will, based on their scale. I mean, that's what I think. I think we take it for granted that there's different sizes of things. We just, of course, there's, the galaxy is a vastly different size than us. Of course, there are galactic superclusters. That's what I think. I think that our science just takes all of that stuff completely for granted, and doesn't see the coincidences. They will not take they won't take it serious. The Dirac's large number hypothesis. They just think it's a coincidence. When you can show very clearly that the force at the Planck scale is exactly equal to the force at the universe, they don't even ask a question. Like, how could they not ask one question? I'd be like,
that was very strange.
Hello,
we're talking about
the
March meeting of the American Physical Society. Some very interesting people were attending, and yet even the session chair had just said very interesting and just left it there.
And nothing,
then
or even find you off to the side.
Silence, it's like, wow, all right.
But you can show these vast similarities. Here's another amazing similar coincidence. If you multiply Hubble's constant, which is the rate of redshift,
right,
times the furthest that we can see. You mentioned the furthest that we can see with JWST. So if you multiply that, right, the rate at which light is being redshifted times the furthest distance we can see, it equals the speed of light. I mean, if you look at that, just go after, just think,
right.
Look at this one formula when you're done, Sal, and you're
okay.
And then look at what mainstream physics says, right? Because if you multiply the Hubble constant times the max distance we can see, around 4620 megaparsecs, right? That equates to 13.7 billion years, and now they're saying, oh, it's older.
27.
Yeah, now it's 27 because it's expanding, right, to fit their math. It's just expanding to fit their bad model math. But if you just go and look at that. H naught times max distance d equals the speed of light. It literally equals the speed of light, which is the furthest we can see. So I think what you're going to find when you look further in spectrums, right, because JWST just looks further to the left, right? It looks further to the red part of the spectrum in UV. Miraculously, with a non-expanding model, we should be able to see further. So we will see more galaxies, and they should be fully formed, right? But what they are saying is that's the beginning of the universe, and they're shocked. Again, they're just constantly surprised. What's the point of a model if you're always surprised, right? they're constantly surprised that they're seeing fully formed galaxies, and they're like, maybe there's something wrong in our galaxy formation model, instead of maybe looking back into their original model. So just go look at that. You'll love it. H naught times d equals the speed of light. It seems so obvious, but they won't consider it. They just say it's a coincidence. It's unbelievable.
Very interesting what you were saying. My goodness, I had so. Have you tried writing a paper on this and trying just like in a preprint server, like Open Science Framework, see if they will accept it, because now they have moderators. They have moderators everywhere. You cannot even put it in a preprint server anymore. This is how bad it's.
I haven't really tried it, to be honest.
The world used to be far simpler, Chris. I tell you. Why do you think I went the patent route?
Why did you go the patent route? Yeah.
They would not accept any of my papers. I kept on trying. I even tried. There's this gentleman that now speaks of UAPs that at the time he was the chief editor of the journal Entropy, Kevin Knuth, and I tried very hard to. And he seems to me extremely open-minded. I mean, you have to be to consider the way UAPs actually travel. So no, absolutely not. Within a matter of like a day and a half, he rejected. And now, wow.
That's
so
amazing.
Eventually, I went the other way. It's the only way you can be heard. It's well, it used to be. Now I think the patent route is even harder. So. Very interesting.
And it goes against everything I was taught to believe about science, that
open-mindedness and the ability to understand, or rather try to comprehend new ideas. The idea that there are no universal impossibilities, that there are conditional possibilities, that once you've achieved those conditions, it's quite possible that these things are real. Just to consider that.
Yes.
That would be scientific.
Just to consider. I mean, there's so many obvious holes in all of our theories and models. Why wouldn't you consider all options?
Correct.
It's like they think they'll be wasting their time, or they're going to look foolish. But you haven't found the answer. So expand your volume. When we shoot a missile, right? When you shoot a AIM-120, there's a data link, right?
Okay.
We have this. It's $1 million missile, right? You shoot.
Right.
Well, the missile, it has its own little radar, right? But it's a little tiny radar, and so most of the time, while the missile's flying there, it's linked back to the plane, right? So the plane's telling it, "Hey, here's your target. Go to this general area." It gets it really close, and then the AMRAAM, the missile, opens its eyes, right, and looks. Okay. But if it opens its eyes and looks, and it's looking in the wrong area, it will never hit the fucking target, right? This is such a simple solution. If you haven't found the answer, you don't know what gravity is, right? You don't know why quantum mechanics doesn't need gravity. You can't relate electromagnetism to gravitational force. Right? You don't know the fine structure constant. You don't know the number 1836, right? The ratio of the mass of the proton to the mass of the electron. Like, these are really big fundamental questions that we've had for 80 years, right? If you haven't found the answer by now, you're looking in the wrong area. Like, you've sent your missile over here, and you will not turn it around, right? And that's why they get some requests for a paper, and they're like, nope, I'm looking over here. Like, it's so short-sighted.
Amazing.
I think, Sal, that we're going to see a huge breakthrough, and I think you're right. It's with AI. I could not have found my theory. I could have not have found the relationships with the Superforce, how it relates across the scales, without AI.
That's amazing, though. That is amazing. That's something that never even occurred to me, to see whether the short is at the universal scale as well. Wow.
Chris Brown, he has a YouTube channel, super small YouTube channel. He lives out in Georgia, calls himself a hillbilly. He shows and I learned that from him. That I didn't find that But
check it
yeah,
out.
the Schwarzschild radius will be
Look
if
at
you
that.
plug it into the universe. And I thought that's what you were relating to when you said, "Oh, the proton is a Schwarzschild radius," and I was like, "Oh,
Yes.
oh he's going to
The
link it
mass
to
of
the
the
universe."
proton. We're talking about like extremely small
Yeah,
compared, of course, to the. So
because I was trying to find that relationship. Because if the
right.
Schwarzschild radius applies to the universe, then I was trying to find how it would apply at the proton level. I was trying to find that scale relationship that I've realized now is what you've argue is the superforce. So I think it's really amazing, man. I think
I
it will.
believe this
AI is going to
C to
find
the
it.
fourth divided by big G is very important. Yes, exactly. And this is what I'm talking about. It's quite possible. Can we actually, because once it actually proves, it finds a relationship that, based on Karl Popper's idea of, can you prove it? Can you show it as falsifiable?
Yeah.
Then yes, then I believe we're talking about AGI level. Once it shows an original concept, Chris,
Hmm.
AGI, and the path from AGI to SI, very small step. We talk about adaptive targeted prompt engineering, the idea of reinforcement learning. You focus your prompt engineering upon a given subject matter.
Hmm.
For example, in the idea of the superforce, argue on quantum entanglement. Is it true that this could generate? Then, if it can actually, if the AI agent can show a relationship, for example, showing the entropy of the black hole. By the way, the Bekenstein-Hawking equation also has the superforce in it. As a matter of
Mm.
fact, it's a superforce acting on the area of the black hole that generates this,
Hawking radiation, or
the entropy of the black hole.
is that so? How does that generate the Hawking radiation? Because another argument for Chris Brown is that the CMB, the cosmic microwave background, is actually the blue shift of the event horizon of the universe.
That's very interesting. I again,
At
I
Planck
don't
length.
have,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't have all the answers. What
No.
I do know is that the superforce should be looked into. That's all I'm saying. Look into this. If not, if you don't want to call it equation one, call it relation one. It's really
Mm.
an order of state relationship. But equation one in that Superforce, the force of unification paper, again, there's another version. So I'm talking about the one that's titled Superforce, the force of unification, the one that I send you. Please make sure that you post that so your viewers can possibly propagate the paper. This is the only way it's going to be looked at. You saw at again at the March meeting of
Yeah.
the American Physical Society when I presented this work and I presented equation one. Somebody should have said something or
One person. Yeah.
complete
Or email or
silence.
something.
And basically the session chair was being nice, most likely by saying very interesting. Most likely, don't get me started, Chris. I'm absolutely
I,
befuddled.
I think so I mentioned kind of some places if people do look the electromagnetic relation to gravity, no one can explain that. The electron to the proton mass ratio 1836, the fine structure constant.
That's a very important. Even the great Richard B. Feynman thought of it as a magic number. I
Yeah,
mean,
out
think
of
of it.
nowhere, it's magic.
Yeah, it is amazing. I mean, think of it. One divided by the fine structure constant. So we're talking about a
137.7.
number, right? So we're talking about it truly represents the ratio of the strong nuclear force to the electromagnetic force.
Yeah.
That's not much of a difference, is there? And yet the strong nuclear force acts within the proton. How can you get it again? I think that's how the superforce comes in. And
Yeah.
actually, it shows the superforce uses the fine structures constant to show that the strong nuclear force equals the gravitational force at the Planck scale.
Hmm.
The fine structure constant is used for that relationship. It
I
shows you
mean,
how powerful the fine structure constant truly is.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you can
Anyway,
find where, but that number comes out of just thin air. They just pull it out of thin air. Um, Another interesting area. So I mentioned those. I mentioned the size of the universe, but also the what I've been looking into is galactic rotation curves. I think if you can explain the galaxy rotation curves
hmm
with energy densities, So basically, what I've been looking at is that you use the as the energy density decreases, right? As you get larger in our universe, energy density decreases. Yes, like a solar
Right.
system is much less dense than you and me, and a
Right.
galaxy is much less dense than a solar system, right? You have all this
Right.
space, and then in between, as you get bigger and bigger, you get much less dense. So energy density. So if everything is connected, I think there's a ratio where there's some energy density limit where the galaxies get to a certain size, and then based on their size in relation to the rest of the universe, now something happens, and there's less gravity, there's less effect, so they can spin faster. Because that's the issue, right? That's why they had to add dark matter, which we've never seen, by the way. No one's ever actually seen dark matter. They can't find it. Whatever. But that's the issue, right? The galaxies are spinning so fast that they needed more matter to hold them together. Otherwise, they would fly apart, right? The stars would be flying apart. But if you look at it as an energy density, some sort of relationship, then you can explain, if you can explain the galaxy rotation curves, the fast rotation curves, without dark, if you can explain it without dark matter, because it's based on the superforce as a relationship of energy density to the rest of the universe, I think you can prove it.
You'll never get it published, my brother.
Never. I publish it on my channel.
Maybe,
That's why I have a podcast.
Maybe an AI agent, yeah. Maybe an AI agent could actually fool the moderators from archive. That would be a great day. That would
I
be
think
a
screw the
great
moderators.
day. Could you imagine?
I think we're going to decentralized science. I think this is where it should be published in forums like this, where
This is the new way.
I think it is.
One way, this will be the acceptable way of putting out new material. But for now, in my opinion, what we truly need here is unification with the mainstream physics community. Somehow bring them to the table. And did you see the recent?
I just think they need an asterisk. Sorry.
Did you see Piers Morgan? Piers Morgan uncensored the
Eric Weinstein and
the Battle of the Mind. Eric Weinstein and Sean Carroll.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, why can't we just bring people together and of different pedigrees and try to have a very logical physics conversation without the need for ad hominem attacks or
like
professional.
That's my point. Is they're starting from the problem is we don't look at the fundamental assumptions. You know, they assume from the very beginning that space-time is the end-all be-all. They assume that there is no vacuum energy state, right? There's no ether superfluid medium. That is their going in assumption. If you write a paper that says, "Hey, I'm talking about a force across space and distance," right? That needs a medium. And so in their brain, it's like the stigma, the UFO stigma, that they it's like a light goes off. It's like ether, and they're not gonna look. They're very interesting, right? He's a crackpot. I think that's the problem, is we've divorced ourselves from fundamental, actually looking into physics at the fundamental level. Like they assume inertia, they assume gravity, they assume Planck, they assume the proton electron relationship, they assume expanding space, they assume dark matter, they assume dark energy, they assume the photon. And none of this stuff has been seen. You can't observe any of it. It's all a bunch of, my argument is BS. Like that's what I'm about.
But the quantum vacuum itself, the vacuum energy state, is very much real. And in my opinion, great physicists, like we're talking about Nobel Prize winner Frank Wilczek, believes in the materiality of a vacuum. He actually had a great, at the time it was called a dialogue, a conversation. I think he beat what's his name, Lawrence Krauss to a pulp by actually proving, or rather showing theoretically, the materiality of a vacuum. Yes, the vacuum is filled with energy, with material. Yes, it's a material state. It's a structure. They're
So it's not a
so
vacuum,
kidding.
then, is it?
No,
It's a medium.
Lawrence Krauss kept on saying nothing.
Yeah,
Nothing comes from nothing. And Frank Wilczek said, absolutely not. The
yeah,
vacuum itself
is something.
is a material structure.
Yep.
Yes.
So it's a medium.
And this is the man, that speaks of time crystals. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to look into time crystals. This guy is brilliant. In my opinion, Frank Wilczek should
I remember.
definitely win another Nobel Prize. He is a remarkable man. I hold him in the highest of esteem. It'd
But
be
I think
great
there's a dichotomy in their
Okay.
brains, Sal. They accept opposing views at the same time. You know, they accept that everything is a field, right? Quantum field theory. That's our best theory we have. That you have all these separate fields, and yet they won't accept that there's a medium of space, right? That they assume that there's just nothing in between us and the sun, and somehow all these things are able to propagate. Energy is able to propagate magnetic fields. You know, they assume that light has a dual nature. They assume that it's a particle and a wave at the same time, right? And they're like, how does that happen? They're like, it's just it's how it is, the dual nature of light. Like, and they don't see how ridiculous these statements are, and yet they get to deny the
But
papers, right?
light is not a particle. Light is a wave.
But it
100% wave.
is it.
Yes.
But they said, what
And
about a
by the
what about a photon? A photon. Never
By
been
the way,
seen.
this whole idea of the quantum vacuum, the 0 point energy not existing, that's total nonsense. Look at the Casimir effect. Look
Hmm.
at the Lamb shift. There are other physical phenomena. As a matter of fact, in my opinion, the Aronoff-Bohm effect speaks very much to the existence of a quantum vacuum. So again, the vacuum energy state is very real and is of physical importance. I will never forget the words of the great Frank Wilczek going against the nothingness of Lawrence Krauss by saying, no, you are incorrect. The quantum vacuum is a material state, hence structure.
But that's just it's
This
virtual.
came from a Nobel Prize winner.
But it's just
So,
virtual
again,
particles, Sal. It's virtual particles. I mean, that's how they explain
there's
these
no
effects.
such thing as
They
particles.
make something up.
There are no such. There's
a virtual
vibration in fields within fields.
Yes, and I think that's we will see AI. I think
Vibrating
will
fields.
find this. I think it will. So
100%.
I guess to just final kind of wrap it up is you found all this physics, and I'm speculating here. Was it from looking at alleged crafts or how they operate and how they move?
No, sir.
Not at all.
Absolutely not. This
Yeah.
was direct. This is what truly got to me. They in the Brett Tingley War Drive, the War Zone, I believe, the Drive. Yes, the original series of articles that were written on the patents. I believe Brett Tingley was told by Tyler Rogway to use UFO patents. So again, this symbol of ridicule was already linked to it. I'm not sure exactly why that was done. Possibly it was done on purpose. Again, it kept mainstream physics from looking into the physics of this. All I was talking about is the coupling of the simple harmonic oscillator with the heaviside version of Maxwell's equation. Something wonderful happens. That's all. Very simple rudimentary mathematics based on what I call maybe second, third year undergraduate physics. So,
and that's how you found the
again,
superforce, is looking at Maxwell's equations or the
superforce was different. The superforce I found from the general the Einstein's gravitational field equation. The
Okay.
whole idea. Again,
Yep.
I choose to call it the Einstein tensor. It couples, of course, the Riemannian curvature with the metric tensor, with the Ricci tensor. It's
That's
all
crazy.
on the left-hand side. It represents a space-time geometry, right?
Yep.
Equals with this term, which is really 8 pi big G divided by C to the fourth.
Yep.
And I just went by pure dimensional analysis.
Yeah.
I realized that what we're talking about is really a 1 divided by a surface area, which
Yeah.
is truly representative of a
A sphere.
geometry, a space-time geometry, a curvature of sorts.
Yep.
It's on the order of this force, right?
Yep. Scalar force.
And the energy density was there because, again, it was all a quick dimensional analysis. And then I
Yeah.
said, what force is that? Then I realized it's the Planck force. But then I realized, and I went further. I just said, is there a
Amazing.
possibility that this could be the force of unification? And I said, how would you prove that? By showing that at the Planck scale, the greatest of the forces, that known force is the strong nuclear force, equals the gravitational force
Yeah.
at the Planck scale, equals the superforce. Again, bringing the fine structure constant into being, hence considering the ratio of the strong nuclear force to the electromagnetic force. It's all beautiful. It's all there, and it
That-
comes out, and it's so gorgeous because
Yep.
I'll tell you, the most complex of problems has the simplest of solutions, depending on perspective, the way you look at it.
That's amazing, Sal. Last February or February 2024, I went crazy. I don't know if you remember, and I'm just gonna tell you, and I don't know if anyone else will believe, but I did the same thing: dimensional analysis, a scalar force, and I used I used the same thing. I got to a different. I didn't get to eight pi or C4 over G, so I'll have to look.
Okay.
But I found basically the same thing and modified it, modified Einstein's field equations, and I called it LUV. So
Wow.
L mu V. I called it the love force,
The love force. I
not
love
the
it.
super force. I
Love
called it the
force.
love force. Yeah,
Love force. Why
because
not?
the
The
big
love
G.
is the,
Yeah, because
yeah.
it was big G U V, and I was like, well, it has to be a letter. It can't be
Check it
G.
out.
And so I made
That's
it
right.
LUV, L mu V,
LUV, the
and I
love
called
force.
it the
I
love
love it.
force. But and I posted that paper on
Very nice.
on X. But again, everyone, they literally said I was crazy, and then afterwards, I ended up in a crazy shelter for 2 weeks.
You know, the hell with naysayers. The
Yeah,
hell with naysayers, Chris. They know look,
that's amazing.
if you want failure, the first thing that comes out of your mouth will be one word: impossible.
Yeah,
That's how failure begins, and that's how it ends. You won't get anywhere by considering the word impossible. There are no such thing as universal impossibilities. There are conditional possibilities. Given certain conditions, everything and anything is possible. The trick is to find those conditions. That's
Mm,
all.
that's amazing. Yeah, I'm kind of blown away, man. I didn't. It took me having you on the show and really looking into the theory and really diving into it. And then just putting together now how you found it, and I came to the same conclusion. But you found the actual formula C4 over G. I was trying to
I
add.
almost did not find it. I
Yeah.
almost did not find it. I'll tell you the truth. Thank God that I found the original paper.
Hmm.
Actually, I took it from a small booklet that Schrodinger published called Space-Time Structure, where I found the original formulation, the original formalism, because nowadays they all use natural units. So they
Natural.
actually get rid. You cannot perform dimensional analysis using natural units, quote unquote, because they consider shit like C to the forces on the order of G square, on the order of H bar. They call that on the order. So they basically, it's part of their quote unquote renormalization process.
Renormalization, right? Normalize everything
Again,
to the same
the
scale.
Rock used to call it brushing, or rather sweeping the infinities under the rug.
Yeah.
The Rock was completely against renormalization. So, in my opinion, it's unfeasible. The whole idea of natural units, quote
Yeah.
unquote, is unnatural.
Hmm.
I would have never found the superforce if I would have considered their equations. No, I went back to the original.
What do you think?
Schrodinger has a beautiful. You have to see this, and I would have never known about this little booklet by Schrodinger called Space-Time Structure if it wasn't for the great Penrose. It was Penrose that said one of the first books on general relativity that he ever read was this, and I looked into it. Yeah.
Have you heard of Daniel Chiba? And he did, he's the one who made at Princeton, recent scientist, and he was actually able to generate a magnetic charge, or he created microvolts. You really should look into this. It's basically he has a
Magnetic
ferrite.
monopole?
He has a ferrite material in the shape of a tube. He did an experiment,
Mhm.
again, I thought of Maxwell's equations, because what he did, he wrote a paper in 2016, and he said there's a loophole in Maxwell's equations, and
That
actually,
grad dot B, that grad dot B equals 0 will one day be proven incorrect, because it basically says there are no magnetic monopoles. No, there are magnet. See, that's one thing that Heaviside did
simplifying
by simplifying the real equations.
the
He got
quaternion.
rid of certain physicalities. The quaternion form, 20 equations, 20 unknowns. Yeah.
You'll love this breakthrough though with Chiba. And so basically, what he did is it depends on the angle. So he took a tube,
Mhm.
a ferrite material. It's some sort of magnesium ferrite, and it has to be in the shape of a cylinder, right?
Mhm.
A hollow cylinder, like
Right.
a long donut.
Right.
And he put it at an angle like this, and it made, from the spin of the Earth, it actually generated a charge based on the spin in relation to the magnetic field of the Earth. It actually generated, it was microvolts, so it wasn't a huge amount of energy, but
Still,
he no shit did it. Yeah, and that paper,
energy can be amplified. Remember that under certain vibratory, quote unquote, resonant frequency conditions,
and in
energy
this
can be
case,
amplified.
you actually
I
minimize
show
it.
that in my paper.
He
Yeah.
said if you make the tube much smaller, like if you
Well,
miniaturize
it can be amplified or attenuated depending
power
on the
goes up.
geometric structure.
Yeah, so when he wrote that paper, and this reminds me of the speech you gave, because he wrote it in 2016, and no one said anything. He didn't get any emails. He didn't get, like, here's a way we can generate free energy essentially just through the spin of the Earth, and he didn't get a single email or no interest, and
Not even a very interesting.
not even a very interesting. He got nothing. So he went and built it himself. It was him, his brother, and a friend in their garage. He's like, fine, I'll do it on my own. He literally did it on his own, not related to
Wow.
Princeton or
Chicken.
anything. And
Yeah,
it produced these microvolts.
that's
And I've
amazing.
seen like nothing in the news.
That's a
Literally
true
nothing.
physicist. That's a true physicist.
Yeah.
That's what we need. More of
Experimental.
his,
Yeah.
more of the Frank Wilczeks out there
Yeah.
who have the guts. See, but
Yeah.
that's the thing. You have to reach a certain level of prestige,
Yep.
like Frank Wilczek, to be able to say certain things. I'm pretty sure if it was me against Lawrence Krauss, I would have looked like a fool. So, again, you
So
need someone like Frank Wilczek to open the doors. Remember what happened to Hans Alfvén? We're talking about one of the greatest pioneer, the father of magnetohydrodynamics. The whole idea of Alfvén waves, magnetic waves. So then again, if it wasn't for a certain gentleman, a great physicist, to basically open the doors to Alfvén and say, that is very interesting, Alfvén would have never received his Nobel Prize. Again, we have to come together. The only way, forget about Planck's idea of funerals. That's too negative. Let's bring it into the light. And the light argues for unification. Let division no longer be the norm of the day. Let's come together, brother. Let's have a conversation.
Decentralization. What do you think of disclosure? Do you think disclosure, if it happens, if there is real alien presence? I guess first thing is, do you believe that there is a real alien presence on Earth? Have you seen any UAPs? Have you had any interactions with aliens, etc.?
I have never had interaction with either UAPs, no aliens, but I'll tell you right off the bat, if NHIs, if ETs, let's call them ETs, and let's call them UFOs, if none of these things, if they did not exist, I would be extremely disappointed. Life would be extremely boring. So
Yeah.
I refuse to believe they do not exist. As far as quote unquote trickle disclosure,
Hmm.
again, I've said it before and I'll say it again. What I think we're dealing with is a process of immaculate constipation. Constipation, gentlemen. That is no way to bring about disclosure. Anyway,
Yeah.
try it. Try it.
Need some
Doesn't come
anti-disclosure constipation pills.
a little bit of Imodium, please.
Imodium. We need disclosure. Disclosure Imodium.
Oh, jeez.
I think we
Or
need
is
a
it from
physics
Korea?
Imodium.
Anyway, yeah,
Mainstream physics Imodium.
that'd be something.
But I am really optimistic actually. It seems like everyone's kind of downtrodden, in the U.S. and everything's going badly. But it seems very nice actually where I live. I mean, the world is yeah, it's crazy, but it's always been crazy, and I think we're
The
finding out
world would
more.
always find a place to stabilize. Sooner or later, it'll come to a place of equilibrium. But it is
Yes,
far from equilibrium that thing gets interesting, that life, quote unquote, happens.
exactly. Life is only at the gradients. There's only life at energy gradients if you think about it.
Out of equilibrium, far from equilibrium phenomena.
And spinning,
That's true.
the earth spins. That's why we're able to, we have the life that we have here. It moves around the sun and creates our magnetic field, that also protects us. So
Aren't we lucky it
out
doesn't
of
accelerate
equilibrium.
and spin?
Yes, accelerating and spin. If we can vibrate enough, we can
Oh,
reach another level.
accelerated vibration. I think that's key to so much. But anyway, I argue for it. Please make sure you post the plasma compression fusion device. By the way, this is and we can close with this. I truly believe that the reason for why it's being cited by various Chinese research teams is that they have noticed because of quote unquote the resonance condition, the energy amplification feature presented within the paper, and also the compact fusion reactor that I discussed, something called dynamic fuses. Anyway, because of that, I think they have come to an understanding it's quite possible to generate a doomsday device based on this idea, a
Hmm.
plasma disruption fusion weapon based
Oh,
on
fantastic.
spontaneous disruption of magnetic fields. If indeed this is possible, it would generate energy yields that would make the tele-Ulam thermonuclear device seem inconsequential in comparison.
But this would also give us all free energy, correct? I mean, do you think we could? Is there a chance
People
that we
people
could not
choose to
destroy the thing?
destroy. See, that's the problem. People, again, it's so far easier to destroy than to create. And unfortunately, many times great ideas are used for purposes of destruction rather than creation because
Hmm.
it is far easier to destroy than to create.
Do you feel like we'd be ready for free energy, or do you think it would just be used for a weapon?
At this point in time, we're not ready, Chris.
Hmm.
We're not ready for a lot of things.
Maybe
We
that's
have
why it's
to we have to
constipated.
liberate ourselves from the slave mentality. We operate as automatons, on almost automaton-like fashion.
Hmm.
Slave automatons is the way I would describe. Think about it. We get up in the morning, we go to work, we listen to the boss yell at us, unless we have a great boss like I do. Thank goodness. Hi, boss. And then we come home, we eat some, and then again, we start the same shit all over again. Groundhog Day. How the hell are we supposed to get anywhere by utilizing that process? Immaculate constipation. It's
That,
it's a general process.
well, maybe the NHI is keeping us in the dark on purpose. I've had that thought as well. Maybe it's constipated to delay until we're ready.
I don't
2027.
know.
You keep hearing that year.
2027. Yes.
Maybe we'll be ready. That seems a little soon, to be honest. I don't know if we'll be ready in 2027. I think we need. I think the problem is we've evolved in a state of non-abundance, right? It's really kill or be killed. It's survival. It's survival of the fittest. That's how we've evolved
It's
to
all
this state.
about survival.
So what happens when we get to an free energy? If you get to abundance, right? We have no resource. There's no land limitations. Will we live and let live? Can we do live and let live instead of the song?
It is very hard to be creative when your belly is empty of food.
Yeah. So what if
Very
everyone's
hard to be
full? What if
creative.
can everyone be full? My friends say that no, it's not possible. We'll still be greedy. We'll still want to be better than that person over there. They have more than I have, or
I once told Kurjai Mongol that the most important thing, in my opinion, is to re-engineer human nature. It is the only way that we have any chance in hell of surviving, not only as a species, also progressing as a civilization toward being ad astra, toward the stars and beyond. The only way that unification can can be achieved is to re-engineer human nature. We're greedy, we're envious, and a lot of us are evil, Chris.
Hmm.
Pure, unadulterated evil. How can you succeed against that?
Yeah, I don't. I think everyone thinks they're the good guy. I don't know. I don't. I think evil is a perspective. It's subjective.
State of mind.
Yeah, I don't know.
Uh,
And I did have a question. If would you accept? Because you've mentioned you're a patriot. I fought for the U.S. for 20 years. Went to combat and um, loved the U.S. But would
yes.
you accept unification if it meant the demise or the end of the U.S.?
As long as humanity survives as a whole,
Yes.
there is no such thing as a nation state.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
There is one humanity, one whole,
Yeah.
one people, one human race. Together, we overcome. Together, we live. Together, we survive. Together, we progress. Together, we achieve the unachievable. Apart, boundaries, barriers,
Yeah. Nation
ice
state.
on your doorstep. Again, a lot of things can happen that go awry, but the only way that humanity has a chance in hell is by unification. The only way. So, yes,
Excellent. Yeah.
humanity is one.
And
All is one,
that's been my experience too.
and all is mind.
And mine. As I've traveled quite a bit around the earth, and all the people I meet, I've really enjoyed them and looked up to them, and I think we're all much more similar than we think. I think everyone's kind of it's just a perspective. And I think we're part of nation states. My whole theory of everything, you're part of a larger. Why you wake up in the morning is really you're a lower dimensional entity in a higher dimensional space. Vector space.
Unification, brother, unification of humanity is the only way this planet, or rather the human race on this planet, has a chance of survival. Otherwise, again, I've stated before, and I'll state it again, we shall be tested. Great civilizations have been tested. They failed.
Hmm.
Will we? I pray that we do not. But the only way we survive is to come together. A unified human race can conquer human nature itself. But that's the only way. Otherwise, sooner or later, it's over for us, brother.
Yeah. Well, I'm
But
optimistic,
I
Sal.
still very optimistic that we will come together.
Yeah.
We must. So, and I always look toward the children
Hmm.
to see them on the playground, to innocent minds that can be, again, molded, that can, and not just forget this molded part, because maybe that's what went wrong with us.
Yeah.
Our minds were molded to be accustomed, and now
Yeah.
just let them be creative. Let them be free. Let them be free of the slave mind. Only then can true unification be achieved.
I think we have a chance. Maybe
Yes, sir. We
at
do.
least 1 in a million.
We
We have a
will.
chance.
We will survive. Something tells me we will survive. So,
Excellent. Well, such a pleasure, Sal. I really enjoyed this. And yeah, keep in touch for sure.
sir, I hope I come again on your pod. I absolutely love the
For
Lehto
sure.
files.
No, it
And
was
you're a great
amazing,
man,
man.
sir. You're
You're
great.
definitely coming
Thank
on
you for
again.
your service. Thank you. Thank you. Those F-16 are magnificent birds.
Yeah.
So,
I do I miss them. It took a couple years, but now I miss. Well, I'm still blown away from that interview going back through and editing. Thanks to all the new members, new patrons, new YouTube members. Really appreciate all your support, and I'll try and do more to make it worth your while. I spent half the week editing this video and then also looking into all the claims made by Sal and went back to my own theory. And I've been diving in and found some really interesting stuff. So I really hope that comes out. We have the Demystify Sci Demysticon conference going on next week. So excited to meet all these people in the alternate physics space and talk to them, pick their brains in person. Thanks again. Please hit the like button if you like this, subscribe for future content, and have a great rest of your day. Peace.